this is the Gaia. Basically, we had three elements to our musical sound. We've got pitch, we've got tone, and we've got volume. Now, I always argued that we've got rhythm as well. So that if you were to look at the screen at the moment, he was saying, this is our pitch section, this is our tone section, and this is our volume section. If I go to the pitch section, didn't really want to touch that, but and just adjust that very first knob, so if I could play a note like this, very obviously I'm in control of the pitch from that section. If I go to the first knob in the tone section, you'll see it move. I can adjust the tone of the instrument. Pitch didn't move, volume didn't move, just the tone. And of course the volume is in the volume section. So now you instantly know where to go. Okay, so we'll play a brass raise. What's wrong with this trumpet? It's in the wrong octave. How do I fix that? First answer is go to the pitch section and take it an octave. So now we're getting our trumpet. Next question, what's wrong with our trumpet? Well, listen to it. Incredibly electronic. The moment I touch the key, full volume. The moment I let go of the key, no volume. Something is wrong with the volume. I would then go on to say it's the shape of the sound. Something's wrong with the shape of the sound. Those of you that may play a brass instrument, you'll know to initiate the sound you have to blow. So you need to get that puffing type sound at the beginning. That's what we've got to head for, things like that. Think like the brass instrument. So we need to find the shape, starting with the volume. Now, you can look at the whole volume section. There's only one dial and 4 sliders. The other 4 sliders must have something to do with shape. So let's play around with the sliders. Let's start with this first one here. It's got an A above it, standing for attack. So if I go to the attack slider and raise it, now the attack of the note, the beginning of the note, is slower. The more I raise it, the slower it is. So now I've got control of the shape of the beginning of the note. The last one is called release, works exactly the same way. I play a note, release it, and it dies away. The longer the release, the longer it takes to disappear. So now we have control of the beginning and the end of the sound. Let's look at the middle ones, starting with number 3. If I bring it down, I actually get the same effect as doing this, turning the volume down. The difference is, it's called sustain. I can choose a level of volume that stays there as long as I hold a note. That's why it's called sustain. When I let go, it's gone straight away. And the fourth one, actually the second one along in the picture up there, is called decay. If I raise that, you'll listen to the sound go to maximum volume, then decay down to that level I've set. So it goes down and then stays there. Let's put it back where it was. This is the trumpet we had. Terrible trumpet. Like I said, we need to make it blow, put a bit of puff on the beginning. So the attack was wrong. Let's slowly raise the attack until it starts to puff. Nothing yet. That's not bad, just a little bit. Okay, the release is wrong. If you can hear it, it goes at the end. Too sudden. That wouldn't happen because you're blowing air through a physical instrument. It's going to take a while for the air to come out, even though you finish blowing. The metal itself is resonating, so the sound does not stop like that. So we'll just raise the release a bit. Too much, maybe. Okay, now, it's still wrong in the middle because if you play a brass instrument, like I said, the hardest part about playing a brass instrument is starting the note, puffing it and getting the note initiated. After that, the body of the instrument and the resonance of what's going on and the air movement inside the body will keep it going automatically to a certain degree. So it's easier to hold a note than it is to start it. So you would expect the volume at the beginning to be louder than the rest of the note. So if I bring the sustain down a bit, like this, But now it's a bit too blippy at the beginning. It's not natural. The puffing sound is not quite there because the decay should also just emphasize that. So I'll raise the decay. Now we're getting close to a trumpet. In fact, if you bought an organ in the late 60s, early 70s, and it said trumpet here, that's what you would get. Exactly. But we're not. This is a synthesizer. What's wrong with our trumpet? Well, quite obviously, all I've done so far is concentrate. I changed the pitch, I changed the volume. I've done nothing with tone yet. Maybe, just as an experiment, maybe the shape that I put on the volume should also be put on the tone. So I'll just copy it roughly so that it looks what I can see on the sliders here. Now let's see what happens. Nothing happened at all. And that's because the tone section is really something quite different. It's not really a tone. In fact, if you look at the screen, it says filter. It's a filter, which is a very different thing. On your stereos at home, you have tone controls. Basic ones are treble and bass, like this. If you turn the bass up, let's say we're listening to drums. If you turn the bass up, the bass drum gets louder. You turn the bass down, the bass drum gets softer. But it's still there all the time. If you turn the treble up, the hi-hats get louder. Down, the hi-hats get softer, but you can still hear them. They're always there. A filter is completely different. A filter starts way over here, way up above the hi-hats and the bass drum, and comes down like a gate, coming down like this, gets rid of the hi-hats. Starts to turn them down, but then just gets rid of them. Comes down like this, gets rid of the snare drum. Comes down like this, gets rid of the bass drum. Completely wipes it out. Now, I can show you this much clearer a bit later on, but just to start with, let's try with one low note, and I'll turn the filter down. I'll bring it down like this. All of a sudden, it's not so bright. Then it's not even middly anymore. Then it's only bass, and then absolutely nothing. I've wiped it out. So now what's wrong with that trumpet? Doesn't sound all that good. The problem is, there's one more slider in that section. With my mouse point, I'll point to it here. And that's called the envelope depth. Yes, I have an envelope, which is basically the shape. I have a shape all ready to go, but I haven't told that shape how much effect it should have on the tone. So I'll raise it slowly, playing a note. Raise this one. Sort of flutish. Then a bit more flugelhorn. The more I go, the more it sounds like a trumpet. If I go too far, which I have now done, then this slider has no effect anymore. It's got nowhere to go because I've just said, no, open right up. So I've gone too far, I'll bring it down a bit. Now we're getting a trumpet. This trumpet, however, still has something wrong. What's wrong with it? Usually, playing a brass instrument, you'd play a note and then introduce vibrato, some sort of motion to the sound, so that it keeps some interest while you're holding long notes. So I can go straight to this control here and see what happens to the vibrato. What I just clicked on there, the very top thing, looks like the blades of the sawtooth, the teeth on a blade of a saw, and is called a sawtooth wave. The sawtooth waveform sounds like a trumpet. If, however, I change it, not where it is here, to a square wave, it's no longer a trumpet. It's more like a clarinet. If I go to the next one, we call a pulse wave, it's more like an oboe. So changing one thing at a time, you're narrowing down on a completely different type of instrument. I can, with that oboe, for example, make it thinner, and so on with this control. So these controls are more about the shape of the sound, which sounds a bit more synthetic, synthesizer-like. The Gaia itself is made up of 3 synthesizers. On the Gaia itself, what I just did is much easier. I just press copy 1 to 3. Now I've got 3. 3 times the volume. let me detune this first one a little bit. Makes it a bit more interesting. And I might even take the second one down a little bit. Ooh, a little bit, he said, a little bit. I'm going to pan this top one to the left, and the bottom, middle one to the right. So now I've got more of a stereo sound, a richer sound. This bottom one down here, I'm going to put onto Super Saw. Doesn't like me doing that. Not too far. Like that. You start to get a very rich synthesizer type sound. And this is long before we get into the next page, which is the effects section, where we can turn on, say, a panning delay. We can add flanging, and so on. Turn it down a bit, add some distortion. Perhaps some portamento. And you end up with this wild sound within seconds just by messing around. But by messing around with some of the concepts that we've been discussing, learning.